Hi friends, I'm Olga Koelsch and welcome back to my studio.
In today's lesson, I will show you how to paint wildflowers in very easy loose style using just brush strokes and simplify all the details. I hope you will enjoy it. Let's start with painting a lupin. I'm mixing ultramarine blue with a hint of quinacridone rose. And usually the tops of Lupin flowers, they start with pale green. So I use my green and I add a little bit of yellow to make it soft. I bathe my brush in this puddle and let's create. Lupin has a cone structure, pretty long flower, and to remove excess water, I use my paper towel and I hardly touch the paper with the 1/3 of my brush, and I start to add a little bit of my blue-violet mix into the cone. And the more we go down, the wider gets the cone. And I add a little bit more of quinacridone rose to the mix to turn it into more purple side. Sometimes I wash my brush to dilute a little bit. I work pretty quickly and I leave some white spaces in between to give air, to give an idea of sunlight. The more we go down, the darker get the blooms, these small clusters. And at some point we need to start to add green and paint the stem. I start to paint stem somewhere in the very bottom, and I would like to add some curviness to the stem. Once your painting is dry, you can add a little bit more of shades with the same mix, quinacridone rose and ultramarine blue. On one side, imagine that the sun shines from the left side, so you can add a hint of darker tones. To make your movements loose, better to hold your brush somewhere in the middle or even at the very end. For A4 size, just in the middle is enough. It will give you this nice random movement. Have a look what's missing, how happy you are with this lupin flower, and we can do the next. Next one, I will paint daisy, but not daisy cosmos flower. It's colored daisy. And if there are some people who really knows a lot about flowers, feel free to correct me and tell how these pink daisies are called. But the most important thing, I use quinacridone rose. I mix it a little bit with my previous mix just to soft it a little, make not that loud bright pink. And now I will slide my brush to create petals like this, like this, like this. And I try to bring all my brush strokes into the flower center. Sometimes we see just the long petals, and sometimes we see it's in the perspective when they look towards us, so we see just a small part of it. Usually cosmos flowers, they have pretty bright middle. I use Prairie orange, that's my favorite orange watercolor paint, but cadmium orange also will work. And I just allow everything to spread and to do the work by itself. I mix green with burnt sienna to make it a little bit sagey, desaturated, more like a dry field, grass under sunshine. And I add another stem. I like when stems are not just a one straight stroke, when they have some story in between. You can add a little bit of greenery around, very random, just like this. And at this moment you can either stop or add a little bit of shade. I try to use almost dry color and I mix it with the previous color, with previous mix on my palette, and I add a few touches to divide petals, to add some shade. Usually the middle of the flower is in the shade, and add some textures. Now black-eyed Susan. To make all our flowers in one color scheme, I will use for the top burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. You see how they mix in and create this very deep gray color. I might add a little bit of quinacridone rose to make it cooler. Just keep mixing until I'm happy with this, about this. And now we will start to paint from the pollen area, from the top of the flower, and I paint it with the dots. So I create this nice top, which is the flower is famous for, and my mix is bold but pretty diluted, so this area is pretty watered. And now I quickly wash my brush and I prepare yellow and orange, and I will randomly mix them, and I start to paint petals overlapping with the black area. Tip of the brush, full brush, release the pressure. I like to make mixes a bit random for each petal, and the same, a little bit of overlapping, a lot of pressure, release the pressure. Let's do it again. Tip of the brush, overlapping with the black part, pressure, release the pressure. Don't afraid of leaving these dry watermarks. I think when we paint in this loose freehand style, that really adds to your to variety, to some freedom, feeling of freehand. Add a little bit of dancing petals around, a little bit complicated to do it to the left side. You can turn the page so it will be handy for you. And here we go. I think I'm happy with how it is now. I just would like to add, you see, I didn't mix enough of green color, and that's now coming a bit of annoying to recreate it again and again. So prepare more, learn from my mistakes. Now let's add a long, nice stem and some green leaves. To paint long green leaves, we paint them in the same style as petals. Touch the stem with the tip of the brush, apply the pressure and release the pressure. About this. Now, if you feel brave enough, you can mix orange, burnt sienna, and add few more shades just in the middle area. When you need to control your brush strokes more, you move your hand towards the beginning, towards the hairy part. For example, when you want to really have control over painting details, and when you need to release the control, you move up to the top of the brush. Next one, I will paint Ironweed flower, or just Ironweed, I think it calls. I prepare purple mix. I'd like to make it more on a pink side, so I use more of quinacridone rose for that purpose. And now let's dance with our brush. Actually, I would like to make it even more pinky. So wait, just about this. And now let's paint clusters of the flower with the tip of the brush. Don't overthink it. Clusters just with the tip of the brush. You create some cone-looking clusters, and you can set up the move with the second brush and our green mix. You can firstly map out how the flower will grow, what will be the main direction, and where buds will set up, and then it will be easier to bring buds on their places. It's very fun to paint just with the tip of the brush. You have very little control over your brush, but you get very random, very freehand brush strokes, which is, I think, very nice experience. Also, if you have some fear of painting, try to control too much, it's very nice to release this pressure sometimes. What I would like to do now, I would like to wash my brush, keep it relatively damp, and lift some of the colors to make it a little bit different. Also, I would like to add strokes of just pink, quinacridone pink. That was a big one. Let's remove it. Because that's how we create this feeling of fluffy flower with multiple petals. About this. My favorite wildflower is poppy. I will use Winsor red. I desaturated it a little bit with our green mix. We can also add a little bit of orange, Prairie orange for sunshine. And with brush strokes, very similar how we painted daisies, we start to create the flower. We slide our brush in this smooth one. Two. I like to leave some white area in between. And poppy flowers, they're famous for their very delicate texture on their petals. So with the tip of the brush, we try to recreate this. You see that from now on I mostly use my mixes which already are in the palette. That will make our collection of wildflowers very consistent, made in one color scheme. I would like to add one more petal, sliding like this, and I would like to add with the tip of the brush, I would like to add some of veins, and I will paint the front petal. This will be the middle. I will paint the front petal, which we can see just a part of this, just this part. I will take another brush because it's more convenient when you paint, and you have to paint relatively quick. No need to wash out your brush every time. So now I would like to paint a stem. When I paint stems, I usually try to move my hand very free, and you see sometimes I apply pressure, sometimes I release pressure. That's what gives this nice feeling. Would nice to add, for example, a bud, this green bud. They have a little bit of hairy small hairs and with almost dry brush we just trying to recreate this idea. And with darker color, this mix would be nice if we emphasize this middle part which divides the bud into two halves, and add some red into that. So everybody knows that is future poppy flower. Now let's paint the middle. The middle color we created, I remind you, it was ultramarine blue with burnt sienna. Make it deep, and with the tip of the brush, no need to paint each and every stem, each and every detail. It's enough if you just map out the idea. And that would be enough to understand that you painted a poppy flower. Next to poppy flower goes usually always goes, Cornflower. And let's paint it. I use just ultramarine blue, but I will dilute it while we're painting. With the tip of the brush, I create these petals consisted of just brush strokes. I try to vary my colors, so I wash out my brush, and just with the rest what I have on my brush, I add more of lighter brush strokes. Just like this, and then I can add a little bit more of darker colors to the middle to the flower center. And now comes the fun part, our green mix. A little bit of the round one, and usually it has very certain texture, which we will create with tipping brush strokes of the very tip of the brush. We will create it very easy. And let's paint a stem. I guess nothing too complicated. A little bit more pressure, less pressure. Pretty long stem. You can add a little bit more of very defined dark blue brush strokes on the very front part, just to bring something on the front. Now I would like to paint Queen of the Prairie, and the florals are very soft light pinks organized in big clusters, so I just dilute my mix of pink. I diluted pretty well. We can always make watercolor darker, and it's complicated to make it lighter, remember about this. And with the tip of the brush I start to create nice clusters. Now you probably can hardly see it, but we will add shades soon. First you just need to make a basement for that, let's say. And to make for basement for that, just think about small balls, fluffy balls, organized on one stem. You can add a little bit more direction. You can put everything on the stem, and the stem in this way can be mixed with our purple, because the flowers are very delicate and purple, and would be nice to use it. So a lot of green small stems connects with each other. I use pretty dry brush to make these brush strokes, and I love that in some points colors are mixing. I don't mind when they do that. And then we paint a stem. We can also add some greenery. Now let's add details to the cluster. First of all, I would like to make it even more fluffy and bigger, so I will add one more group, one more on the top, and then I will just grab a little bit of from the mix which dried already, and I will go with the tip of the brush. It's almost dry mix, so sometimes it mixes with our pre-made background, and sometimes it doesn't, which creates this nice variety. The sun shines from the top, so the darker parts of the flower will be on the bottom, because this part of the flower is more exposed to sunshine. And what I was doing, I was removing extra bright colors just with a paper towel. It's very handy to always have it next to you, and then you can make a lot of corrections. Don't overdo it. Sometimes you can add just these tipping moves around the cluster on the dry paper, and that all brings an idea of very, very small blooms around. About this, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there, so our stem doesn't look too lonely. And just like this. Next one will be Milkweed. It's yellow, orange flower, and we already have it in our plate, and it will be quite similar to what we've done. We start to paint the tips of buds with our brush with orange color. I remove some excess water. I even would like to add a little bit of dark red, and then I start to paint clusters, connect them a little bit, and add some open flowers, maybe more yellowish. So I'm creating kind of a gradient from deep orange to light and to more yellow. Some flowers open bud look on us, some just stay in buds, stay closed. It's a clustered flower, so we might like to put it on a stem for our convenience. And the stem actually can be more of a brown type firstly, and then it will turn into green. But this is of course not enough to make the idea of big blossoming, not big, but blossoming flowers. So I prepare a little bit of place for a future cluster. No need to go into the details, but let's create something bright on the sunshine. The idea, what we are doing in this lesson, on my other similar lesson with wildflowers, we simplify the shapes. We bring all complex floral shapes to just brush strokes, to create the idea. Now I paint with Winsor red, with almost dry color in between flowers, just to add the second layer of shades in a round. If would be great if you can write in comments what style do you prefer, what's your challenge to do to simplify shapes, to paint in this loose style, or you prefer more a traditional botanical illustration when we have to go into details, the transparent technique, which I have a book about and which I showed everywhere. So I'm very much interested for what's your preferences in painting, what you like to paint. I would like to add a bit of a greenery. It's usually some lawn shaped leaves, and you see how green leaves connects all these flower, all these stems, and just place together. Sometimes I apply pressure, I release the pressure. I like to dance with my brush about this. Now let's paint milkweed, these ball looking flowers with a lot of clusters. And let's in a simple way, let's prepare our ball shape just with brush strokes, with the tip of the brush. Then we add more and more. We move towards the middle of the flower and leave a lot of white space around. It might seem that I move my brush pretty chaotically, but I always try to move towards the center. So the tip of my brush most of the time moves towards the center. Now let's add some shades, just the same mix. You see, during this session, during this lesson, we used how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paints, and that's pretty enough. Now I add shades. Sometimes in between, in the white areas, and sometimes I overlap with the previous ones. Remember that this part is the most light part, but to show the light, we need to paint the dark. We can't see light without dark accents. And that's enough. Also, don't overdo it. Let's put everything on a stem. I will mix our two dark mixes. Now it's something grayish, greenish. It's pretty straight stem, so let's keep it like this, and maybe some leaves around. And the last one will be our hardy geranium or bloody crane's bill. Our purple mix, quinacridone rose and ultramarine blue. I The flower has 5 petals. Let's don't forget about it. They are slightly heart shaped, and I paint with 1/3 of my brush. Firstly, I just set up the petals, how they will be connected. I leave some white area in between the petals. And while the paper is still wet, I would like to add a pretty dark middle. I use my dark mix, what already happened to be on my plate, my palette. So with the tipping moves, I just add these in the center of the flower. I actually would like to paint maybe a few of them to show you a little bit more of perspective. 1, 2. In countable flowers with countable amount of petals, it's good when you count when you count the petals. So to get to this more life recognizable idea of the flower, and a little bit of side view when we look on the bud and we see it like this. And now we will bring everything on a stem, but firstly let's make the middles. This dark one was of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And because we have ultramarine blue in both mixes, in the dark one and in this purple one, it mixes very pretty lovely organically. It does not create a dirty feeling. About this, don't overdo it, and we will add details once it dries. I would like to add a little bit more of a deeper green here and connect. Put everything on a stem. If you, for example, see unexpected bleeds, you can either wash your brush, remove water with the paper towel, and just lift these unnecessary parts, which can also, by the way, create some nice shades, just like this. Or you can try to remove it with a clean piece of your paper towel. I actually would like to add some details, some veins, and to do that I need dry brush and dry dark mix of our ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose. I have my brush, and with the tip of the brush I do several brush strokes from the middle of the flower towards to the edges. Try to move your hand along with the shape of the petal. So it should not be like this, It should go like the petal goes, in that direction. And once. see that my brush gets too dry, so I have to water it again and go over, divide a little bit the petals, add this idea of veins, very delicate style. And this is it.
Thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you enjoyed the process. I'm looking forward for your feedback and comments. I read each and every one from you. Thank you for your support and see you soon. Bye bye.